It's an Olivel. I don't know if he's changed page numbers, but in mine it's page 15 of Olivel. At the top of the page, it says Bṛhadāraṇyaka Upaniṣad 1, 4, 10. And the 10 is always the last verse. So if 10 is the last, we go up 2 to 8. It's about a third of the way down. This innermost thing, this Ātman, it is dearer than a son. Innermost thing. There are inner things, my friends. The mind is an inner thing. The ego is an inner thing, but not the innermost thing. Notice the language. What is the most inner thing? The most inner thing is Ātman itself, it's consciousness. All right, so the Indian Vedanta tradition goes beyond the mind. Unlike Plato or the Greek philosophers, they didn't go beyond the mind. They thought the innermost thing was the mind. So the Bṛhadāraṇyaka would have said, hey, you've got to keep going. That's inner, but it's not the innermost. It's more inner, but it's not the innermost. You've got to keep going beyond the mind. So the innermost thing, this Ātman, it's dearer than the sun. It's dearer than wealth. It's dearer than everything else. Why do we do all of these things? Why do we want children? Why do we seek wealth? Because we think it's going to give pleasure to the self. So what is the dearest thing then? It's the self. We say we love our children. We say all this stuff, but really we love them because they give pleasure to the self. They give meaning to the self. So just call a spade then. And that's what this Upanishad is saying. If a man claims, if someone were to claim that something other than his self is dear to him, I say, no, it's not myself. My horse is the dearest most thing, or my house, or my wife, or my whatever, my yacht, my wealth. If someone were to say something like that, something other than himself is dear to him, and someone else were to tell him that he will lose what he holds dear, that is liable to happen. You'll lose your yacht. You'll lose your wife. You'll lose your kids. At the very least, you lose them when you're on a deathbed, if you don't lose them in life itself. Kids go off, right? Your wife might die or run off with another man or whatever it might be. It is definitely going to happen to everyone. This is just basic metaphysical truth, right? We leave everything behind at death. So if someone were to tell him that he will lose what he holds dear, that is liable to happen. But you never lose yourself, because the self is eternal. You cannot lose it. It is who you are. Doesn't matter what state your body and mind are in. That Ātman is eternal. Wherever you end up with your karma, you end up in this birth or that birth, celestial realm, hellish realm, body of a tree, body of a bug, alligator, you name it. But the Ātman is always going to be. You can't, even if you wanted to, you can't lose your Ātman. You commit suicide. You just go to some disembodied state of consciousness. You cannot, my friends. We are eternal. These are the first teachings of the Upanishads. Sat, that's what. You've heard Satchidananda? What does Sat mean? It's a present active participle of the Sanskrit root us, to be. So Sat means a present active participle. Present, it's always present, not past. I was. A participle is an adjective, and it's present, it's passive. I am that thing. So it's actually translating as being. Because anything that's ing is a present active participle. Walking, talking, speaking, going. In English, to make a present active participle in English, you put an ing on the verb. But the Ātman is always in the ising. I like to use the word ising, because if we make up words, it forces us to think. What do you mean by ising? That's not an English word. And it forces us to step out of our linguistic boxes and think carefully about what's being transmitted. Ising. It's always in a state of ising. Being is actually what we would say. And if something's always in that state, then you might as well say it's eternal then. So you notice that Sat is translated as eternal. It's not actually what it means. It means always in a state, an ongoing and a beginningless and endless state of ising, of being. Okay? So you can never lose it. So a man should regard only his self as dear to him. And this is the yogi. Does it sound selfish? Well, everyone's selfish then. Everyone's selfish. Whatever we do and filter it through the self. So the yogis decided, well, let me seek the self, first of all. Let me figure out who this self is. Then we'll decide how to deal with the world and help others. All those are secondary considerations. How can I help anybody else if I don't know what the self is? The self that's supposedly helping others. So When a man regards only his self as dear to him, what he holds dear will never perish. You can never lose the self. So this is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga, if you took my midterm exam, took a Rutgers midterm exam and midterm quiz, and it says define Jnana Yoga in 2 sentences, all you'd have to write to get 10 points would be Jnana Yoga is that body of material that speaks to, number 1, the eternality of the Ātman, and number 2, its distinction from the world, the body, the senses, the sense organs, and the mind. That's it, 10 points. And this whole Upanishad, Vedanta, Sankhya, and other schools you may not have heard of, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, all of it is saying the same thing in different ways. Some using reason and argument, some quoting scriptures, some Patanjali talking about the states that lead to it, whatever they're talking about. The grand finale goal of Jnana Yoga is experience of the self. First knowledge, then experience. You can't experience something you don't know.